Those are low battery.
Do you want me to mic check this? I guess.
Let's hope to be. Let's talk about that in just a minute. We're trying to get started with this class.
Okay.
I'll talk to you in just a minute,
I'm gonna
Tiffany.
be the one that baptizes me, okay?
Okay, we'll have to talk about that later. Okay. There we are.
Okay.
He's checked.
Mic check. We good?
Yeah, no, it's better. I can hear it.
You can hear this. This is good. Yes.
Yeah, may I?
Of course.
Actually, say let's put it a little higher for you. There we go.
Yeah, mic check.
Okay, the Lord be with you.
With yours.
Good morning. Welcome to all of you as we get the Westminster class series up and rolling here in the new year, and of course at the beginning of the new year. And it's cold outside, and we're still coming off the holidays. It sometimes takes just a little bit of effort to get things rolling efficiently. But now we're up, and now we're going. The advertisement for this series was on a series, three-part series on St. Augustine by David Beer, who's a colleague of mine at Malone. But at the last minute, we had ran into a problem. David Beer is an Anglican priest also, and he is unable to produce this or do the series as we had asked. But he pointed us to Kevin Bergdorf, who I have heard at Malone. Maybe a couple of you have. You spoke last year?
It was last year.
Last year at some point on Augustine. And so we're very, very happy that he was able to fill in really at the last minute to come in with us. He has, he's got his own sort of personal journey that he will tell you about, but Augustine and Augustine's confessions play a very, very large role in that. He has studied Augustine quite a bit. He's done graduate work at Oxford in England on Augustine, and has made a lot of excellent presentations about the confessions and Augustine. And I, let's see, I wonder if most people would agree that Augustine may be the most significant post-biblical theologian in the Christian church. There might be some people disagree with that, but I put him right up there.
I mean, that's certainly my opinion.
That's certainly your opinion. There might be, I don't know, some Eastern Orthodox theologians or something who would go with with somebody else. But here's my point. We have all been deeply influenced by Augustine, whether we realize it or not. Just his influence on the church and on theology for centuries and centuries and centuries, in terms of how much people him in a wide range of areas. And that's why I think he's important to, well, there's a lot of reasons why I think he's important to study, and Kevin can do a better job than I can in explaining why that may be, and that's why we have him here this morning. So thank you. Kevin, we'll turn it over to you.
Okay, I appreciate it. Yeah, I'm super happy to be here. Everybody can hear me clearly? Okay, wonderful. I'm not really a podium guy. Probably going to wander a little bit as I chat with you. First of all, this is a beautiful worship space. I grew up in Greene as a child, so I'm familiar with the area. But this is the first time that I've been here, and I'm very impressed, very pleased to be here. I feel very comfortable. Someone has a collar on, and there's really, really beautiful art that I immediately identify with when I walk through the hall. So I already feel, through the architecture and the symbolism, a warm reception in being here. So I will say one thing just by way of quick introduction. This was last minute. I am friends with Dave Beer. We go back a ways. I have spoken at Malone on the Confessions. I just came off of a year series with the Augustinians of Villanova, doing a 12-month series on the Confessions. So this is a book that I'm pretty much constantly reading. In any event, this came up yesterday. I got a text. Jay and I talked, and I said to Jay, well, let me talk to my wife. I got to figure out, like, this is really short notice. And then I was on my way up to the seminary in Cleveland, And I teach a New Testament survey course up there to the diaconate guys, and I kind of got bounced from one room, and then they bounced us to another room, and then they bounced us to a third room. Like, man, when are we ever going to land and actually be able to do our class? Well, they landed us in the St. Augustine room. Okay, well, and I walk in, and there's a plaque. It's got the Tolle Lege, take up and read. Okay, well, there's a sign, and then an image of one of the most famous pieces of Augustinian art is on the back wall, and I thought, okay, I'm a little bit of a mystic. Every Christian should be a little bit of a mystic, I think. All right, follow the signs. So, all right. So I called Jay. All right, Jay, I'll be there tomorrow. And then I pulled in, looking to find a spot, and I saw your sign out front. And the sign out front, the Hebrew word tikva popped up. Now, this would be really embarrassing, but I have a tattoo in Hebrew of tikva. I'm not going to show it to you. It would be very awkward for all of us at the beginning of the presentation. Follow the signs.
We'll believe you.
Yeah, just take my word for it. Follow the signs. I tried to follow the signs in the Christian journey. One of the books that showed up for me, in following the signs was St. Augustine's Confessions. That was in 2012. And I read that book, and it was a watershed spiritual experience for me to work through the Confessions and come to terms with who Augustine was in terms of the sheer genius of the man, and also to come to terms with the type of spirituality that he was describing, and I was just massively attracted to this. And so my interest in the Confessions predates any academic work in Augustinian studies. So I was very affected by the book. I owned a business that I got out of in 2019, which was great timing because everybody knows what happens 2 months later. Got out before COVID. Worked on Latin at SUNY, and then during COVID was at Catholic University of America doing Greek and Latin, and then started working on a reader's edition of the Latin text of St. Augustine's Confessions. I did that for about a year before I went to Oxford. I did a research degree at Oxford, mostly focused on the Confessions and some really interesting squirrely stuff that happens in there, and other points of interest related to St. Augustine. So this is something I'm always interested to talk about. I have a lot of motivation to be here and to be here with you. So St. Augustine, his life and legacy. This is going to be a 3-part series. Part 1 is just the genius of the man. We all live downstream from Augustine. That's what Jay said. He's right. I'm going to explain why in ways that probably will surprise you. Part 2 of this is next week. We'll talk about the Confessions. Confessions breaks pretty neatly into 2 parts. The first part is Augustine's spiritual autobiography. It's the first time anyone in Western civilization attempted anything like this. It's the first half of the book, but then the second half of the book, Augustine goes in a totally different direction. It starts talking about time and memory and how to interpret Genesis and see the church in it, and people get lost because they don't get the connection. I'm going to try to explain the connection to you. Next week, the autobiographical section. The following week, what's going on in books 10 through 13, where Augustine does some really interesting things. Okay, today, though, we're just going to talk about Augustine. Who is he? Why is he important? First of all, we know more about Augustine than anyone else who lived in antiquity, by a lot. Even if we pull out our ChatGPT and our AI, and we take statuaries from the British Museum, we try to reimagine what these people look like. Anybody want to hazard a guess who this might be? There's no penalty for wrong guesses on a Sunday morning. It's probably Aristotle. This is who we're looking at. So you see the statue, but then you see the real person. He's Greek, kind of. The Greeks were afraid of him. It's Alexander the Great. That's what he looked like. That's kind of what I picture. That looks like a world conqueror. Oh, it looks like me. I'm not so great, though. Everybody knows who this is. The Ides of March. Et tu, Brute. There's Caesar. Even without the benefit of AI, we know more about Augustine than Aristotle by a lot. We know more about
cut out, so if you just turn toward us, we'll still get you.
Thank you. Oh, that's good. That further gives me an excuse not to be up there. Born 354, dies at 430. He's centered right in the middle of Lake Antiquity. He's the signature personality. Everybody's interested in St. Augustine.
Just face us.
I'll just face you. When I was at Oxford, it was not at all unusual to encounter Augustinian scholars who were atheists. Everybody's interested. You don't have to be in the theology department. You don't even have to be in the philosophy department. There are people that study Augustine that I'm pretty sure don't really like him, but he's just that important. And of course, the text that we will talk about, out of the 130 or so books that he wrote, our interest is only in the Confessions. The Confessions is arguably one of the most influential, most significant texts in the Western canon. You don't find this, generally speaking, among church fathers. You don't find this among Christian authors in the first 4, 5, 6 centuries. So Augustine's doing something that other church fathers are not doing, right? He's contributing to the Western canon because Augustine stands in a long line of Latin literature. He's actually considered to basically be the end of Latin literature in any meaningful sense of the word. The contribution he makes is absolutely staggering. In Confessions, Augustine reveals himself to us in a number of interesting ways. First of all, Augustine reveals himself to us as a sinner in unambiguous terms, in ways that are transparent without being embarrassing. Augustine identifies very clearly, from the time I was a child, he'll trace it back to his infancy. From infancy, oh, I have to use my tea. Sacrifices we make. Okay, he'll trace it back to his infancy, up through his childhood, into his disordered adolescence, into becoming a young man with aspirations to make it to the top of the empire, which he does. He is an aspiring young man, an aspiring Roman. He will reveal himself to be the prodigal son. This is the image that he uses, and this is not necessarily explicitly in connection to his relationship to Monica, his mother, although this is there. But this is the most powerful metaphor that Augustine uses to describe his spiritual condition prior to his final conversion, his yielding to Christ. He sees himself, he sees the souls of everyone as prodigal, but he embodies this, he lives this out, he is the prodigal. When we get further into the Confessions, basically books 10 through 13, Augustine further reveals himself because he's writing the Confessions as a bishop of the church. He's describing the first 33 years of his life, 10 years after the fact when he's about 43, 44, 45 years old. So we get a whole different vignette. We see Augustine as a bishop of the church. He reveals, he discloses himself. It's very interesting the way that he discloses himself because he talks about what his struggles are in that moment, trying to be a servant of Christ in that position. And he does so in ways that I think we'll find meaningful when we get to that. And finally, we begin to get an idea. Augustine would not have thought of himself in this way, but we begin to come to terms with Augustine the saint. Augustine the sinner, Augustine the prodigal, or the seeker, or the searcher. Augustine the bishop, Augustine the saint. Because Augustine was self-aware enough to know that he was a saint in the making. But he believed this about all of us. I'm a saint in the making. This is my destiny. This is what I'm made for. I am becoming a saint. And he can pinpoint and say, in the trajectory of becoming a saint, he deals with this mostly in Book 10, here's where I'm at, and here's what's difficult for me. Most people don't expect this. Bishops don't generally talk this way. He talked that way. So we'll get to this. Okay, so from the inside, from people who have a natural sympathy for the Confessions, who are Christian people who are probably aspiring to or following Christ and have some sense of what God has called them to, okay, we see Augustine from the inside. We see him the way that he wanted us to see him because he's explicit in the Confessions. He has purpose in doing this. He wants us to see him this way so that it sets us on fire and we're cultivating the same sort of aspirations. Wonderful. But the whole world is interested in Augustine. People who are not interested in being Christians, not interested in aspiring to what he aspired to, are still massively interested in him for a variety of reasons. Okay, this is kind of right and kind of wrong, but I'll tell you why. Augustine, you will frequently hear, oh, Augustine, he's the father of autobiography. Yeah. Okay, yes, he is. But the Confessions is not an autobiography. Because if you read a modern autobiography, you come to that with certain expectations as a reader. Augustine will disappoint you. He only mentions the name of his mother once in 5.1 million words. He lives with a woman for 15 years, never tells us her name. Has friends that come into his life and out of his life that he'll spend half of a book describing his grief over, doesn't name them. You don't do this in autobiography. He is the father of autobiography because he goes inside himself and tells a story that other people were not capable of telling before that point in time, right? But it's an impressionistic, it's a spiritual autobiography, and we know that. It will make more sense and we won't be disappointed. But yes, Augustine is the father of autobiography. No one does anything close to this before Augustine. Augustine does things in Book 1 that people still talk about because he has massive intuition into child psychology, and in particular into how children acquire language. He says things in Book 1 of Confessions nobody had said before. He's very observant about how human beings acquire language. This is a whole field now, multiple fields around this area. He's in some ways the father of child psychology. In the Confessions and in a lot of other places in Augustine's works, he talks about the nature of language being a sign, and he sees signs in everything. We can't even resist the temptation to even go down this rabbit hole. But the nature of language as sign, this is, in our contemporary language, this is the field of semiotics. Go to Wikipedia, look up semiotics. Augustine's name is in the article. He's considered by many people the father of this field. These are scientific fields. Augustine's philosophical contribution is massive. I'm just going to say that because we got to keep moving. Augustine deals with, in Book 10, the nature of memory. And he's going to say things about memory that if you pull up journal articles in cognitive sciences, neurosciences, people are still talking about what Augustine said about the nature of memory. And so in some ways, he's a contributor to that field today. Augustine had ideas about politics. He was a fierce critic of the Roman Empire and what it represented. Was it even an authentic state? What makes something an authentic state? These are the basic philosophical questions of politics. He's exploring these. Necessarily, Augustine is an ethicist. He's dealing with questions of ethics all the time. This picture makes no sense. No, wait, it does. I really like pre-Raphael Brotherhood art. Some people dig it. Some people think it's corny. I don't think it's corny. I like it, but that's not the point. The point is, Augustine is mostly, not arguably, the father of the Middle Ages. Because when the Middle Ages is looking, the Middle Ages is a time in the world where people are committed to authority and the authority of books. Okay, we all get this. And if you've got 5.1 million words from somebody as good as Augustine, this is your guy. This is the guy who tends to inform the conversation. This is a book I have. Admittedly, I haven't read it all, just read a little bit, enough to be able to fit it into a presentation. Aquinas, the Augustinian. Aquinas' project, we don't need to get into this, but it was to deal with Aristotle. If you ever thumb through the Summa, every other page, Aquinas refers to the philosopher. This is Aristotle. And then he refers to the apostle. This is Paul. And then he refers to Augustine. And Augustine is arguably the most quoted person in the Summa. Aquinas was an Augustinian in an important, significant way. So we see Augustine a certain way. But history sees Augustine in another way that totally goes beyond the scope of what we are interested in here in this moment. Okay, so that's Augustine, the genius, Augustine, the framer of the Middle Ages, Augustine, who we all live downstream from in Western civilization, even if we're working in certain of the sciences. Okay, so what is Augustinian spirituality? So we got the man. We're going to talk about how Confessions works, but let's just jump into the heart of it. What is this about? Well, arguably the best way to access the major themes of Augustinian spirituality is in the Confessions. This is far and away his most famous work. Most people can't name 2 or 3 other things that he wrote beyond the Confessions, and that's okay because this so dwarfs everything else that he did. And there's a reason for this, because it's a microcosm of just about everything that he thought about and cared about. You can get it in one book. I'm going to give you a quick tease with each of these pictures, and then we'll jump into a couple themes. A little bit of time for questions. One of the things that Augustine recognized early on in his life is where we come from matters. Your family of origin matters. My family of origin matters. Augustine had a very, very engaged, very religious Christian mother. He had a very emotionally withdrawn, very distant pagan father. He says a lot about Monica in the Confessions. He gives a whole book to her. Book 9 in the Confessions, in my edition, I entitled it Santa Monica. It's all about her. The whole of Book 9 is about his mom. This is a Roman man. Spends the entire book. People don't do this in antiquity. You don't write about your mom, and you don't write a whole chapter of a book about her. Writes a whole chapter of a book about her. How much do you think he says about Patricius, the somewhat distant father? Gives him about 2 or 3 sentences in the whole book. Where you come from matters. Your family of origin matters. The most famous quote from the Confessions, if you go to church regularly, once a year, it's going to find its way into a sermon or homily. It's a massively popular quote. Our heart is restless until it rests in you. Yes, this is the starting point of Augustinian spirituality. Our default position in life is restlessness. Our default position is not rest. We have to go on a journey to get to rest. This is the whole point. I've just told you the whole point of the Confessions. We're restless. We want to get to rest. It takes a journey. He gives us the journey. Problematizes the journey. Yes, we're on a journey. There's a problem, though. Every soul is disordered, and every disordered soul is its own punishment. We'll work this out a little bit. Augustine's notion of God is very much not the naive idea of God sitting up in heaven, almost being confused for Zeus with a thunderbolt, looking down at sinners on earth to try to figure out who he's going to zap when they finally transgress too far. Now, this is, of course, an absurd and childish notion, but people think this way. This is absurd and childish, but Augustine says this is not how it works. You're already fallen. Your nature is already disordered. Your own choices are working out the punishment that your sin deserves. God doesn't have to, a very interesting idea. It makes God quite passive in the matter of judgment, and it makes us quite responsible. Thankfully, grace, though. In the midst of this, disordered affections and a restless heart that's on a journey, God's grace comes to us, and God's grace comes to us before we merit it. This is a word Augustine uses, comes into all of our theology, prevenient grace. It's the grace that comes to me before I've done anything. God's not waiting to see the scorecard get settled or for me to accumulate enough merit for him to say, there it is. You've passed the test. Now I'll be gracious. This is the opposite. Augustine is very much trying to help people understand, no, the grace of God is coming to you. It's chasing you down. The grace of God is chasing you while you are sinning, trying to draw you to Christ. This is a little bit difficult to see, but this is supposed to be the conversion of Paul. I think the picture is bigger in a minute. Conversion, especially in the American experience, we think of conversion as a singularity. I prayed a prayer, I walked an aisle, a parent talked to me. This is the world I come from. I'm not criticizing this necessarily. We think of it as a singularity. I had someone, they had a religious experience. So-and-so was a drunk, but now look at him. What happened? Well, he found God. He had a religious experience. Amazing. And that is amazing. But what Augustine contributes to our understanding is, yes, there are moments of conversion. Conversion is a process. You don't stop being converted. We are continued, because to be converted is to be turned. God is gradually, he's turning us fundamentally. There are points in time where we are fundamentally turned, but he is routinely, as we participate, he is routinely turning us towards himself and turning us into saints. This is the story. This is the message. This picture will become more obvious when we get to the bigger version. Augustine had a massive sense of the interiority of life. You have to develop the inner person. This is a great antidote to a rather superficial and now social media saturated culture where everybody is creating an external self. We create in Merton's terms, we create the false self that we want everybody else to buy. And Augustine's spirituality is a great antidote to this. You have to develop the inner reality of who you are is the only thing that matters. The external self, this is passing away. We need a path, we need a way to develop interiority. Finally, the notion of confession. The instinctual response to this, whether you're Catholic or Protestant, as we hear confession, our minds immediately go to one place. Confession of what? Of course, confession of sin. We have all been correctly trained this way. But Augustine said you've been incorrectly trained this way, because it's not what the word means. Not in the context of the book. Confession is in Augustine's mind, because Augustine had basically memorized the Psalter in Latin. After his radical conversion, he basically memorizes the Psalter in Latin. There's various words for confession. Confiteor, I admit, I confess. Right, but when you encounter this word in the Psalms, it almost never means I confess my sin. It's shocking to people. That's not what the word means. In the context that mattered to Augustine, which is in the Psalms and in the Latin Bible. When you find the word to confess, it's the person making confession to God and saying, I confess who you are. It has nothing to do with confessing who I am. Confession of sin is confessing who I am. But confiteor in the Psalms is, I'm confessing who God is. That's what the Psalms do, right? I mean, you have penitential Psalms, Psalm 50 or 51, but the gist of the Psalms is the psalmist is confessing who God is over and over and over and over. This is the root of Augustine's spirituality. So when you hear confessions, you think, oh, he's going to tell us about all of his sins. He will, but that's not the point. He will do this, but that's not the confession that he's making. Even the confession of one's own sin is ultimately a confession of the truth of who God is. This is a massively important idea for Augustine. So, to recap, these basic ideas of Augustine's spirituality. We have to reflect on the people who formed us. That's what he does in Confessions. So all of these are in the imperative. This is what I think Augustine wrote the Confessions for a purpose, which he's trying to give us a model. He's trying to represent himself as the every person. He's saying, look, the life I lived as the prodigal, that's all of us. So let me tell you what I figured out. This is what I'm saying, this is what he's saying. He's saying we have to, wherever we are in life, we have to reflect on the people who formed us. He does this in the Confessions in the first 3 or 4 books. His parents, his friends, his teachers, people who formed us. This can be positive, this can be negative, but we have to come to terms with it. We have to acknowledge that we have a restless heart. I want something, but the things that I see that inevitably will pass away never quite do the job. Like it never quite solves the problem of restlessness. And this is Augustine's point. When the human heart tries to rest in things that themselves are in motion and in flux, this can only end one way. The heart only rests when it finds the thing that doesn't move. It's going to take him all 13 books to tell us where he finds this. Augustine knows that people want good things. He spends time on this, books 2 and 3. People don't do evil because they like evil. Okay, so there is psychosis, we understand this. Okay, there's extreme cases, right? But the exception illustrates the rule. The rule is people don't do nasty evil things because they like nasty evil things. People do nasty evil things because they want something good. He'll be at pains to explain this to us. Nobody chooses bad for bad's sake. They choose bad because they want something good, but they want it the wrong way or in the wrong proportion. That's a very interesting idea. Everybody wants good things. It's just some people are willing to do bad things to get good things. This is the problem. Every disordered soul is its own punishment. The problem is when people do bad things to get good things, they make themselves miserable. Because that's the natural law. Augustine says you have an opportunity. If you have experienced God's grace either through gradual conversion or through some terrific spiritual experience, you have the opportunity to reinterpret your life through the lens of God's grace. This is what the Confessions is. Quite literally, actually, and there's reasons for this I'll get into next time. But the purpose of Confessions is for Augustine to say, oh, wait a second. I see the grace of God was chasing me all along. Now I can go back and reevaluate everything. From my infancy that I don't remember, to my childhood, to my adolescence, to my disordered sexual awakening, to the woman I lived with who I can't even tell you her name for certain reasons, with whom I had a child who died when he was 16. The story goes on and on. I can go back, I can retrace the whole story, but I get to look at it in a different way now. And Augustine is saying that's available to you. This becomes a possibility. This is a painting of questionable aesthetic value, which is trying to show you the instantaneous conversion of Saul, in Acts. But Augustine's point is, yes, you do have radical experiences, but conversion is an ongoing process. God is continually turning you and me. Mainly the way God turns us is through the reality of the interior life that we are cultivating. God does not turn us into saints through our external deeds or the false selves that we create, that we project to others, that we want them to buy. God works within the mind and the heart of the individual that is disposed to that. So there has to be some discipline. I have to seek silence. I can't live in the noise at all times. Augustine challenges us to think about confession in a new way. The starting point is not confession of sin. People get confused on this because the notion of original sin, peccatum originalum, some such thing in Latin, yeah, he invented the term. I mean, Paul recognized the idea in the book of Romans, but Augustine came up with a Latin term to attach to it. Yes, Augustine is the starting point for this notion of original sin, but that's not really the starting point in a certain sense. Because people aren't designed to admit their sin. People are designed to praise the person who made them. This is his point. A few minutes for discussion. I want to chit-chat about this for a little bit. No, good for today. Questions about Augustine, his life, his times?
I'll break the ice. This is a more theology type thing, but oftentimes we hear the process of justification, sanctification, glorification. When we think of the process, how would Augustine frame justification then, rather than conversion? Or am I confused? About 2 hours.
Yeah, so this is going to be we jumped into the deep end, which is fine. Because let me say a few things on this in an effort to be as non-controversial on this as possible. So Augustine is a lightning rod at the Reformation in terms of trying to come to terms with exactly, yes, the ordo salutis that you described, predestination, justification, sanctification, glorification. Yes, I was well trained by Protestants at one point in my life, so this is a familiar conversation. Augustine is a place where people in the 16th century went to fight over these questions. So I can tell you my opinion on what I think Augustine is saying, and I can tell you how I understand that other people have read him differently. Clearly, Luther and Calvin came to Augustine and found in Augustine a great support, a great bulwark for the theological positions that they were very eager to defend at the time of the Reformation. Yep, understood, noted. My own reading of Augustine is, if we read broadly in Augustine, a few things are going to strike us rather sharply. The first of all is that this is a person who is unambiguously Catholic. He's a Catholic bishop. And if you ask him how he knows what books are in the Bible, he's going to tell you the tradition of the church tells him which books are in the Bible. I mean, this is what he says. I'm not making this up, and I've been Catholic for like 2 years, so like I was Protestant my entire life. I'm just telling you what I've seen in the text. So when we come to Augustine, we're going to find someone who is self-consciously Catholic. And when he's thinking about, well, let's trace it all the way back to the beginning. When he's thinking about baptism, for instance, he's absolutely going to argue for baptismal regeneration. I mean, he's absolutely going to argue for certain aspects of an understanding of salvation that are not going to be entirely adopted at the Reformation. So when we come to Augustine's idea of justification, Luther's idea of what Augustine is saying in this area, we'll just use him as the example, is not coextensive with everything that Augustine had to say about the subject. So my read of Augustine, for years and years, having read him as both a Protestant and a Catholic, is that his basic structure for understanding how people are saved in that particular order, honestly, I think if you pick up the Catechism of the Catholic Church, you're going to be a lot closer to what Augustine's view of the situation is. That said, Augustine, and this was a shock to me in reading Augustine, is that Augustine develops his ideas about predestination and election to a degree that the Catholic Church ultimately will not accept. So I had this kind of confused idea in my mind. Well, if Augustine said it, like, well, that must just be what the Catholic Church believes no matter what he said. And this is not true of any church father. I mean, his individual theology is not coextensive with the theology of the Catholic Church. And so there were things that he said that the Catholic Church eventually says, okay, yeah, well, that fits, we're going to keep this, and it gets worked into the program. But by and large, Augustine's notions about predestination and election and foreknowledge, those are basically not accepted. And so when Calvin in particular picks this up at the Reformation, he is absolutely channeling almost exactly what Augustine is saying about predestination and double predestination, right? But this is not the view of the Catholic Church. So it's a little tricky. Does that answer the question, or? Yeah, you're getting there. Okay. Well, wait.
We didn't have 2 hours. I was teasing.
Yeah, okay. Any other thoughts or questions on Augustine?
We do have 10 minutes, though. Come on, don't be shy.
It's not really a question, but I had this moment when you were talking about the lightning bolt experiences and stuff. I actually, coming into church this morning, had a conversation with my 2 kids about that. My youngest was talking about how this one building had been struck by lightning so many times and all these things, and my middle one was like, oh, God must not like that building or something, like sort of thing. And then Zeus came into the conversation and all these different things. But it is very much, though, like you said, it is almost a childlike vision of how God works. And so I don't know, that's not really a question. It was just something that popped in my head when you were talking. So.
No, it is remarkable how these conversations connect to one another. But yes, Augustine's view of the judgment of God was a massively passive thing. And that's not in no way to deny a final judgment, in no way to deny final destinies based on the choices that people make. But in the ordinary course of life, yes. Kind of the Zeus image is one that Augustine knew well. I mean, he was a thoroughly trained classicist. And he very much was able to kind of purge that imagery out and realize that most of the punishment, most of the things I suffer related to my sin are self-inflicted. This is basically what he's saying. I mean, if we put this into kind of modern counseling or psychological terms, like you're suffering because you're making bad choices, right? And bad things do happen to people. Augustine recognizes this as well. But generally speaking, we suffer because we make terrible choices about good things.
And it's not judgment of God necessarily when those bad things happen,
right?
sort of thing.
Right.
So.
It's the ordinary consequence of being in a fallen state and not participating with the grace of God.
I am massively underinformed about Augustine, even though I was a Catholic for like 27 years.
Oh, wow.
And there's lots of St. Augustine schools.
Yes.
Is there an elevator pitch place I can go to like understand what in the world you're talking about when I come back next week?
The Cliff Notes version. Like on the whole or book by book? Yes, I have a video on this. Because I was working with the Augustinians in Villanova last year, and I think the last video that I did, I summarized the entirety of the confessions in about 20 minutes. Is there a YouTube video? Yes. Yes, this is. Yeah, it's out there. I will make sure that that's made available. But I would say the video on book 13, if you just do the first half of it, it's going to give you the complete summary. Yes.
One of the stories in your confessions that illustrates the points you've been making is when he steals pears from a nearby farmer. Maybe if you talked about that, that would bring it to be a nice illustration of all of the points he's making.
Okay, so the book 2, the story of the pear tree. Okay, so illustrative that is, in book 2 of the Confessions, Augustine begins to describe his disordered awakening as an adolescent, and there's of course a sexual element to this, but there's another element to this as well, which is he's got a friend group, and with his friend group, they decide one night, they get bored playing at the park, it's kind of what he says, got bored playing at the park, it's night, in kind of the thrill of the group, we go and find the pear tree of the neighbor farmer. The pears weren't very good. I actually had better ones. This is exactly what he's saying. I had better ones that tasted better at home, but it was the group mentality, you know, the swell of the group carrying us, and we went and we just picked every pear off the tree. And I took a bite of it, and I spit it out because it wasn't very good. And then we thought it would be a great joke to gather up all these pears and go and just feed them to the pigs and watch the pigs eat them. So he has this experience, and people for 16th, 17th centuries have been reading this, and I'm like, well, you're just a kid playing a prank. But it misses the point, because in book 2, when Augustine talks about the pear tree incident, he dives way, way deeper into the psychology of it. And he says, well, was I just doing evil for its own sake? This is actually the question behind the pear tree incident, even though he's 16, 17 years old. The meditation that comes out of it is, do people really do evil for evil's sake? Because there was nothing in it for me. Had better ones at home, wasn't really that fun. I watched the pigs eat it. And the conclusion that Augustine comes to in that meditation is, well, wait, people don't really do evil for the sake of evil. People do evil for the sake of something else. And ultimately, by the time you get to the end of book 2, what Augustine will concede in his confession to God is, well, there was something to it. There was the thrill of the conspiracy. It wasn't about the pears. Guys, it was late at night, and it was something about this, if we translate this into modern parlance, it was something about the toxic friendships and the thrill of doing this. Did I capture, would you add something to the...
Striking, right? You're doing a bad thing. Oh, you can. Oh, and then he reflects on why he thought about it that way. And
yes.
He realizes things about his own limitedness and the grandeur of God.
Yes.
I think I found that video you were talking. Is it from Lay Augustinians?
Yes.
Part 12, Book 13.
That's the one.
So I'll post this on Facebook so anyone can go ahead and watch this and
wonderful.
Be more prepared with questions for next week.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
In your talk, I missed the last thing you said. You were talking about family of origin, yes. And so I just missed the sentence. So I'm assuming it had something to do with we are images of our parents.
Yes.
And what we come from. Maybe finish talking about that.
Sure, yeah. So Augustine's reflection on family of origin has a diverse relationship at home between his mother and his father. As I mentioned in book 9, were you looking for like the tagline or kind of?
Well, I missed the last thing you said, but I think it was an important conclusion point.
I don't remember exactly.
Biologically, we represent our parents, right? In some ways, we look like them.
Yes, and Augustine's concern is the spiritual, what he would consider the spiritual disfigurement of his father. This is the problem in the relationship for him, because you've got Monica, who is practically a saint in her own lifetime, Like Monica is a friend of Ambrose in a way that Augustine doesn't even become a friend of St. Ambrose when they're in Milan together. She has access to people because of the holiness of her life. So he sees this, right? This is, but he's a boy, so there's the father-son relationship. But he sees his father, and the great criticism of Augustine for his father is that his father never took any interest in his sexual or spiritual or emotional well-being. It's a very shocking thing for someone to say. And this would be a very almost cliche thing for someone to say in the 20th century, right? Or 21st century. But it's a very shocking thing to say in the 4th century. He actually puns on this, which it comes out in the Latin. Because he talks about it in the one or two lines that he talked about his father. He says, because his father was massively invested in Augustine's education and went to great pains. His father was not a wealthy man per se. They were like upper middle class, right? But his father went to great pains. Like the rich people in their neighborhood didn't do for their kids what Patricius did for Augustine. He's aware of this. But he sees this as completely disconnected from any interest in spiritual things. Anyway, the pun is this. I'll bring it into the English so it makes sense. But he says, my father, he uses the same disertus as the Latin word, puns on it. He said, my father was concerned that I would become disertus. This is where we get dissertation from. Literally capable of writing a dissertation. I'm stretching it a little bit. My father was interested that I would be highly educated and refined. Disertus. But he was not concerned that with reference to God I was a desertus. I was a desert. It's very interesting. The artistry that Augustine employs when he talks about his father. He was concerned that I was disertus, a genius. He didn't care about my soul, that it was a desertus, that it was a land of famine with reference to God. And so this is what Augustine wants to take inventory of. How does this relationship affect me? How does it still affect me, an adult? Patricius would be baptized near the time of his death as a Christian. So he dies a Christian. This does not totally fix things. Interesting. Maybe some of you have seen this. A parent becomes religious, spiritual, has an experience, becomes a Christian later in life. They're not really your parent anymore. They were your parent when you were 5, 8, 12, 16. Oh, but now this doesn't fix it, Augustine. And if it didn't fix it for him, there's probably a message in there. So next week, books 1 through 9. The Lay Augustinian series has every book, but if you jump to 13, it'll give you a good synopsis of the whole thing for your questions. So hopefully this was helpful. I certainly enjoyed being with you. Beautiful, beautiful place to be, beautiful place to talk about Augustine. Thank you.
That's it. And yeah, that wraps it up. Go with God. And Augustine's thoughts on your heart and mind.